welcome back to the Primitive Camping and Bushcraft podcast. My name's Chris Spear, and today we're going to be getting into something that separates the real from the fair weather campers, and that is one match and wetwood. I mean, how often are you really going to go out into the woods with a match or one match? But, you know, in the event of, and something like that happen, are you still going to be able to cook your dinner? Are you still going to be able to boil your water or whatever? So, yep, coming to you live from, well, I can't say live, but I'm coming to you and underneath the tarp of Camp Wut-Da-Heck in the middle of thunder and rain. So you may hear thunder in the background, and you may hear some raindrops hitting, and you're going to hear some frogs here in a minute. And it is slam full of mosquito bugs today, and mosquito bugs don't play, especially down here by Camp Wut-Da-Heck. And these things are atrocious. So, because out here in the woods, when it's been raining, and what a better day to talk about this subject than today, because it has been raining. It's been raining all day. All the wood's wet. Everything's wet except for the dry ground right here under the Camp Wut-Da-Heck. And, you know, when the rain's coming in sideways and everything you own gets soaked, it's not about bragging rights. It's about survival. It's about grit. We're not out here just brag. Well, I mean, sometimes you will brag, but, you know, it's not a very good idea to be the bragger, be that guy that always, you know, one time I had one match and it was slightly wet, but I still got it to light and lit a fire and I saved all the people in my expedition. No, it's not that kind of stuff. You know, essentially it's a reality check. So, you know, weather doesn't care about your plans. It really don't. I can't tell you how many times that I have scheduled, me or Dave, you know, we'll schedule a kayaking trip or a camping trip or something to the effect, and it will just flood. It will just be a downpour. Like, nobody wants to just head out into the woods camping like that, you know. Camping's supposed to be a relaxing time, but it can be done, you know. If everybody hears this quote unquote survival situation stuff, and that's not really what I'm talking about when I'm doing this podcast. What I'm talking about is primitive camping, you know, heading out, hiking out, setting up, enjoying your time, and catching you some food and hiking back and going home. And that's what I'm talking about when we're talking about primitive camping. I'm not talking about going out with just a deer hide, sitting on it and carving some arrowheads or a knife or whatever, like Jake Trent or Donnie Dust or any of those guys. You know, what I'm talking about primitive is, you know, you're going out and you're just going camping without all the modern conveniences in the world. Now, that's not being like bushcraft. You know, bushcraft is you're going out with just, there's some lightning. Bushcraft is you're going out with just a couple of, a knife and a ferro rod, you know, not to say that can't be done, because it absolutely can. But, you know, when it gets down to, there's some thunder. I wonder if y'all can hear that. But when it gets down to it, wet wood doesn't apologize. It's not going to apologize. And one of the things that really is going to separate you from the others is being wet outside, starting a fire when it's wet. It can be done. It can be done when everything is completely soaked. It takes you a little bit longer. I mean, you got stuff that's been soaking in the water for a month. You're not going to get a bow drill out of it, you know, most of the time. But I've seen some people that have. I've seen people on, let's say, that TV show Alone, you know. I've seen people actually pull it off on that show, and it was like, it took them days to do it, but they actually got it. So if you cannot start a fire under pressure, you're probably not going to eat unless you brought like something that don't have to be cooked. Right here, bump the microphone again. Right here, got my little blue Nalgene. I have used this thing for years. It is amazing at keeping my water. I usually carry a metal water bottle whenever metal water bottle when I go into the woods in the event of I have to boil some water. But this Nalgene, I have used it for years, transport water back and forth, and it serves me fine. So, but anyway, Webwood, like I was saying, is not going to apologize. If you can't start a fire under pressure, you might not eat that night. And this is if you didn't bring any like MRE style or something that could be eaten without being cooked. And whenever your morale is literally bleeding out and it's cold outside, and a single flame can mean the difference between pressure and giving up. A lot of times, you're going to have more than one way to start a fire. And that's what I've been preaching for a couple of years now. And especially through my book, Primitive Camping and Bushcraft, which, by the way, I am just now launching 3 ebooks. I have 3 ebooks available on my website, SpearOutdoors.com. And if you go over there and check those out, there's one on shelter, there's one on fire, and there's one on water. The big trifecta. And you can check those out. They're on sale for like 40 some odd % off right now for $5 or $6 a piece. And you could buy the whole bundle of all 3 of them for like $11.99. So when you go to do your fire, the first thing you're going to do is pick your location, right? So that's going to be half of the battle. You're going to pick your site that you're going to start your fire. And a lot of times with that, you're going to pick a nice little spot that's got some firewood around, where your camp is. You're not going to want to spend all day dragging firewood to your camp. Let's see, Monday, I'm leaving for a kayaking trip. We're going to paddle 18 to 20 miles down the river, and we're going to camp out overnight. And so we're going to try to select a spot where it has some firewood there, and we could just pull the firewood up and go ahead and cook our dinner. But, you're going to look for cover, thick trees, natural rock shells, anything that keeps the rain off. Be careful when you're doing it around rocks. They heat up. Sometimes they crack and can fall or explode. You don't want to really do it around the rocks too much. So it's starting to rain a little bit. Maybe y'all can hear that. Hopefully it doesn't get too loud. But you're going to look for cover, thick trees, natural rock shells, anything that keeps the rain off. And you're going to want to be camping in higher ground because it's going to drain faster. Valleys stay wet longer, and that's because all the water is going to be draining down in there. So you don't want to be like here in South Mississippi. You don't want to be camping in the high water mark because right now everything's flooded anyway. And with this rain right here, the water will come up a foot, and it's crazy. So you want to build a barrier if you have to, something that is going to protect your fire from the rain. Now, I've talked about this many times. My son and I went on to a camping trip, and we were out there for 8 days, and it rained for 6 solid days and 6 solid nights. I thought we was going to have to build an ark. And the river come up to 35 feet. It was the second highest flood stage since 1920 that it has ever been. It was 35 feet. And there was not a piece of dry land anywhere. It was all underwater except for where we were camping was the only dry spot. And then it rained so hard, the only way we can have a fire was to use fat wood as our firewood. And no, we didn't cook over. I mean, we cooked in a bush pot, we had a cast iron Dutch oven that we hung up over the fire and cooked in. But other than that, that's the only way we was able to get a fire started or to burn because of the rain. So with wet wood can still give you dry stuff to start your fire with. When you split that wood, it should be dry in the middle, depending on the type of wood and how long it's been submerged or how long it's been wet or whatnot. And I'm thinking that this rain is going to be a little bit too loud for this microphone. We'll find out here shortly, huh? So you can split a log, you can split a stick, and it's still going to be relatively dry in the middle. And that's going to be able to get you some kindling. You'll be able to do some feather sticks, stuff like that. You want to peel your bark off the logs to get to the dry layers underneath. And, the bark usually is going to have a barrier in between that's going to be like soaking up the water. Your water is going to stick in between the wood and your bark. So, take the bark off if you can. If not, and we're talking about stuff that's been laying down for a little while. We're not talking about like your giant oak trees that you just cut. So you want to hunt for dead branches that haven't touched the ground, that are still hanging up. And you can walk through the woods and find tons of dead branches. I mean, these things will be laying everywhere in these vines and the other branches and trees and brush and stuff like that. You'll find branches all over the place. So, when you're finding these dead branches, pick them up, break them up, make them small, cut them small, and then find you some fat wood. Find some fat wood. If you got resinous trees, you have fat wood. If you got pine trees, you got fat wood. And birch bark, pine resin, those things are nature's way of starting a fire, and they are extremely flammable. And I've preached about those for, I can't tell you how long, since I started with this book, since I started this podcast. I've been telling you about fat wood, birch bark or pine resin, all those things have oils in them. Cypress bark has a lot of oils in it, and you could break that down into real fine fibers. And every year the tree exfoliates. I think that's what they call it, where it sloughs off the bark and grows new bark underneath it. And you take the old bark and you could break it down into like cotton ball size threads. And that is what gets it. That separates the wheat from the chaff. That right there is what actually starts your fire, is those cotton ball size threads that you can get from a resinous tree such as cypress or cedar or whatever. So now we're going to set the stage. You're going to do fire building 101. It's the same thing, the same process. The only thing that's different in this whole process is you're starting wet wood. It's wet outside. The ground's wet. That should be it. Everything else should not be wet. Your fire tinder should not be wet. You can find fire tinder. If you got fat wood, birch bark, or pine resin, you don't have to worry about the fire tinder, because that's what it is. You just make some shavings with the backside of your knife and make a pile, and just these dudes are going to start you a fire regardless. And, tiny shavings. You can make feather sticks, pencil-sized lead kindling, pencil lead size kindling. So you're going to do pencil lead size kindling, and it's going to be damp, but if it was up off the ground, it's not going to be saturated. It's not going to be soaked. It may be damp, but there's a difference. Once you get your fire lit, that stuff will easily catch on fire. If that catches on fire, then the bigger stuff catches on fire, and then so forth, so on, so forth, so on. So, a fire lay, you want to make a fire lay that breathes. A fire lay that breathes is a fire lay that lives. A fire lay that breathes is a fire that lives. Let's see if I can spit that out correctly. Don't choke it. Build it right the first time. Don't choke it out. Give it plenty of room. Give it plenty of space to breathe. Get it, plenty of chaos to actually develop the flame. I think it one of these survival schools or something, I saw a video sometime that says fire loves chaos. And that has stuck in my mind ever since, because if you think about it, it really does. Fire is a chaotic being. Fire is alive. And, it has to have oxygen. It has to breathe in order to eat. It is like a mold or a bacteria or a virus that it has to eat in order for it to continue to grow. And there was a big old snake just slithered right across in front of me on the ground 10 feet away in the woods. That is crazy. It looked like a black racer or something, but still, nonetheless, that is why we are doing this in the great outdoors at Camp Wut-Da-Heck. Now, we got the frogs in the background. We got the rain on the tarp. This is starting to turn real, guys. This is really starting to turn real. So, remember, your one match deserves a fire that is ready to catch. So, we're pretending like you have one match. If you have one match, make it a fireproof match. A fireproof match. Make it a fireproof match. Whoa. Wait just a second. All right. After listening to this podcast back, I had to jump back in here and say there is no such thing as a fireproof match. What I was trying to convey was the windproof or stormproof or waterproof matches. Okay. Back to the show. I saw some videos the other day. That was pretty cool because they took regular matches, dipped them in wax or something. Then they took the striker and somehow they taped it in there with the matches. And then they put the whole thing in a rubber balloon and sealed it off. And then they just pulled the top and it struck, and the rubber balloon became a fire extender. And it was pretty cool. You got to see if I can think of it, if I remember when I'm editing this and putting the podcast up, I will see if I can find that link to put into the show notes, because that was pretty doggone cool. And if I have one match, that would be the match I want. Typically, I don't even waste my time with matches. I either have a ferro rod or a big lighter, but we're going to pretend like we're using a match on this trip. So we got our fire lay, and we're making our fire lay up off the ground where it's not going to get put out whenever it starts, because if the ground's wet and you're starting a fire on the ground, odds are it's going to put out your fire. And so we're not going to choke it out. We're going to let it breathe. We're going to let the fire just grow on its own. There's some thunder. Remember, this one match deserves a fire that is ready to go. Not one of you, not one of you is going to hope that it don't catch. I mean, because everybody's going to be like, "Dear God, please let this fire catch." So, there's a picture in all of this that we've been talking about, that if you really think about it, in life, storms will come. It's not an if, it's a when. Storms are going to come, and no matter what, just like I'm sitting out here at Camp Wut-Da-Heck right now with the rain beating down on top of the tarp and the lightning going and the thunder going, storms in your life are going to come. And sometimes you'll feel like that soaked piece of wood, weighed down, waterlogged, no spark left in you, but God sees the dry heart inside. Now, Isaiah 42 verse 3 says, "A bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out." You may feel like you're too beaten down to catch fire again. You're too used up. You don't have any. You're soaked with all the troubles of the world. You may feel like you're just weighed down and tattered, but he isn't done with you. Just like when you split that log a while ago to find the dry core. Oh, more thunder. Just like when you split that log to find that dry core inside to make a feather stick or to make shavings or do whatever you're going to do to start a fire. God splits through all of our circumstances to reach that part of us that still is ready to burn for him. So he doesn't need perfect conditions. Kind of like we don't need perfect conditions to go camping. He don't need perfect conditions. What he needs is you to be willing to catch fire again. So back to our one match mentality. You got to prep like your life depends on it, because sometimes, and I haven't had to put in that situation, but one time, but that could have been the one time that it had to apply. But you want to prep like your life depends on it, because sometimes it does. You want to practice like your life depends on it, because sometimes it does. You practice like somebody's life depends on it, because sometimes it does. When we were in the military, I was a medic, and we practiced like somebody's life depended on it, because it really did. People's lives depended on me, depended on the people that work with me or under me, and the doctors and all that above me. People's lives depended on, and we had to practice like their lives depended on it. So what I mean by this is double your tinder, triple your feather sticks. Make it start. Don't worry about how long it takes you to do this. It's not a race. You just go ahead and make it start. You make it work. You do the job that needs to be done. If you're trying to get a fire started, get her done. Build this thing slow. Think about it smartly, and set yourself up for success. Do not just go in there and say, hey, I got this one little twig. I got this right here. I'm going to burn my match. You're not going to have a fire. If you only have one match with you, you're not going to get a second chance. And with life, you're not getting second chances. That match, it's really not realistic to be out in the woods with one match, but in the event of, and I'm not going to say never, because it possibly could happen, but in the event of, you don't want to take a chance that you're not going to be able to get the fire lit. So, fire aids, what I mean by fire aids is tools in your pocket, nature's tools. These things are aids, fire aids. That's what I'm talking about. That birch bark that I mentioned earlier, which we got some form of variation. I think it's a river birch or something like that, but it's not as good as that stuff up north. But it's still feasible. It's still usable. It's still paper thin. I just don't think it has the oil residue or the oil content that the northern birch does, the stuff that they get up north from here. Birch bark, pine resin. Pine resin is good, but here's the thing with the pine resin is, if you're going to start a fire, you better have a lot of it, especially if you got one match, because it's going to take a bit for it to get started. Dry grass. All right. So, Chris, we're sitting here talking about wet wood and starting a fire, or a wet fire, and you're wanting to guess that you have dry grass. Well, yeah, you're right. But if you think about it, you will be able to find some dry grasses underneath thickets. They will be drier than the other stuff. Like right now, sitting out here at Camp Wut-Da-Heck, I am looking around, and I can tell you, I see 2, maybe 3 different species of weeds that I could use as a tinder, even when they're wet. No lie. So it can be done. You can find grasses, you can find weeds, you can find different tinders for different things. Now, that's not to say that you can't bring man-made backups like cotton balls soaked with some Vaseline or petroleum jelly or whatever. My favorite, black bear fire plugs. And I tell you what, I just revamped the website, and they are top of the list. I carry them with me everywhere I go. I got a bag of them dudes, and I'm telling you right now, they are worth every penny, every pretty penny. And those things are awesome. They start a fire. I have not been able to not start a fire with a black bear fire plug. Did that make sense? Not been able to not. Now, here's one thing that I have recently upgraded my ferro rod from just a regular plain ferrocerium rod to the all-weather fire starter. Now, I got an affiliate link for this thing. I don't get paid anything, but you get 10% off. You use my code Spear Outdoors. But these all-weather fire starters, they're expensive. They're $35, $45, $50. But I'm telling you right now, it is the absolute most amazing fire starter I have ever used. I've emailed Edmund a couple of times, and he is so fired up about this venture he's doing. These fire starters are amazing, and I'm telling you right now, they are the best fire starters on the market. So what they are is they are probably not a half inch. It's like probably a 3/8 ferrocerium rod, which is drilled into 1 inch diameter magnesium block. And we're talking some awesome magnesium, not that cheap Harbor Freight stuff that you get, at the checkout counter for $1.99. No, we're talking real deal, Holyfield, real school stuff. And that striker that he uses on there is the most amazing striker. I'm telling you now, I don't know what kind of striker he's got on these things, and I don't know how much it costs him to source all this material from all over the world to build these things. But I'm telling you right now, this is the most amazing fire starting tool I have ever used. And when he says all weather fire starters, I promise you, they will start fire in all weather, rain, snow. Actually, I used them to start a fire in the snow. I've used them to start a fire in the rain. I've used them to start a fire in the dry, and they are amazing. So, if you're going to use something like that, magnesium shavings are amazing in wet weather to start a fire, especially with some kind of tinder that is damp. Say you had the damp grass and you throw some magnesium shavings in there. Well, kind of like I mentioned a while ago, don't go half-hearted. Don't go half-cocked. Go ahead and spit some shavings into it, because them things burn at 5,000 degrees, and that's plenty enough degrees to dry out that grass before it catches it on fire. And I'm telling you right now, you will have a fire. You will have a fire. So, I cannot explain to you enough how much or how awesome it is to start a fire with the all-weather fire starter. All right, the rain is really coming down now, but listen, the rains are going to come. Life is going to get heavy, but if you've built the skill, if you tended the fire of your faith, one spark is all it takes to reignite everything. One flame reignites everything. And I guess that's the whole gist behind this one match episode today. So out here, starting a fire with wet wood is called survival or bushcraft or primitive camping, whichever way you want to go. But in life, keeping your faith is eternal. Keeping your faith burning is eternal. So in all your ways, acknowledge him and let him always direct your paths. Stay sharp, stay ready, stay faithful. And when the storms come, trust the one that can split the hardest wood and set your heart on fire again. Thanks for spending time with me out here at Camp Wut-Da-Heck with all the dogs. I got Leia and Ranger and Tess out here, and I really enjoyed it. And it's been different out here in the rain this time, but we'll see you next time. God bless you.